Hey guys, it's Chuck here, coming to you from warm California today. So we're out here at almost 8 o'clock at night, bringing you this little added tutorial about the exposure triangle. So as we talked about the other day, three things make up your exposure. It's your f-stop, your aperture, your shutter speed, and your ISO. So today I'm going to show you how changing your aperture will give you two different effects. But because we're going to change the aperture, we're going to have to adjust our ISO or our shutter speed to stay in correct exposure. So remember, we don't want our pictures so dark that you can't see them or so bright that you lose the highlights and they're blown out. My next tutorial is going to be on those little blinky things, the highlight warning on your camera. That's going to be next. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus here to get this tree nice and sharp and the stage in the background out of focus or blurred. So I'm going to start at an aperture. I'm going to go f1.8. It's the widest aperture my lens has, the fastest speed, lets in the most amount of light. My ISO is at 100 because I don't want to introduce grain or noise into my image. So I'm focusing on the tree, f1.8. My ISO is at 100. My shutter speed needs to be at 1/200th of a second to get my exposure meter right center in my viewfinder. So focus and snap. Okay, so you'll see on there how the background is blurry, but this tree is nice focus. So now let's say you're going out doing a sunset or a shot at the beach and you want everything in focus. So in this image, I want not only my tree in focus, but I want the stage in focus. So that tells me I need a larger depth of field. So you get that by changing your aperture. So we're gonna go up to an F. Let's go with F8 should be good here. And so changing an F8, I'm letting in less light now. I've lowered my aperture, I'm letting in less light. So I can let more light in, adjusting one of two things on that triangle. What's gonna let more light in? Yeah, you got it. Raise the ISO or lower my shutter speed. So I'm with a 50mm lens today on my D7200 crop sensor here. Again, I wouldn't shoot this with it, but it's great for the purposes of this. So now I'm at an F8, letting in less light, but it will give me a greater depth of field. I'm going to first adjust my shutter speed as far as I can, but staying at 1/50th or greater. So I've got my shutter speed down to 1/50th of a second, but I'm still underexposed. So now I need to up my ISO to get my exposure right. So I'm going to hold my ISO button, crank my dial, and if I bring my ISO right to bring my ISO to 640, I have a perfect exposure again. So now I've adjusted from the aperture from 1.8 up to 8 because I want greater depth of field. I brought my shutter speed down to let in more light because the aperture is letting in less. The lower shutter speed will let in more. And to compensate, because I didn't want my shutter speed to go too low, I've raised my ISO to 640. And we're going to snap this shot here. Focus on the tree, stage in the background, and shoot. So now you'll see on that picture that the background is in much more focus than it was in the first shot. So here's the first shot again, and here's the second shot again. So you can see the difference. So remember, if you want to adjust your aperture to get greater or shallower depth of field, you have to compensate by adjusting your shutter speed or your ISO to get a perfect exposure. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll talk to y'all later.